Morning, children. How are you all today? Doing fine? Okay. And I hope, along with your academics, you are taking care of your health also. That is very important. Okay. So, today we are going to discuss consequences of shock therapy, its outcome, its consequences. Fine. Before it, all the topic what had been discussed by us. The way we begin with the toppling of Berlin Wall, then the chain of events that followed it, German unification, the East European countries replaced their communist governments as there had been a mass demonstration there. Then in detail we discussed about the Soviet system, the role played by Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin in its disintegration, the factors responsible behind the Soviet Union's disintegration, what had been the consequences and shock therapy in post-communist regime we had discussed. Fine. Any question you do have, you must ask. Today we are going to discuss about consequences of shock therapy. In this consequences, children, you would be discussing uh, the largest a term in fact in history that is known as the largest garage sale in history, largest garage sale. Okay. Then the way the currency, Russian currency, their value declined, it got devalued. Okay. Fine. Now, in this consequences of shock therapy, in fact, because just this consequences of shock therapy, under this, what is very important for we to understand that where it has been implemented, administered, means in the decades of 1990s, and people had a lot of expectation. People had expected that the consumerist prosperity would be at the top. That's why we say that this shock therapy administered in the 1990s didn't lead the people into the promised utopia of mass consumption. Yes, yes, children. Utopia is a term what we consider, what we imagine that ideal state of affair, ideal condition. Fine. So, ideal state of mass consumption, what people expected, it was not so. And what did we see? That in general, it brought disastrous impact for the economy. It brought ruin to the economies, and people were in disastrous condition in the entire region. Fine. In Russia, everything had been state controlled, we are well aware. So in Russia, the large state controlled industrial complex collapsed. Just imagine. And almost 90%, about 90% of its industries were put up for sale to private individuals and companies. Okay, 90% of its industries had been put up for sale to private individuals and companies. Means from the state control, now the things were being given into the control of the private individuals, companies, and the new entrepreneur. Fine. Now, in it, since the restructuring was carried out through market forces, not by the government directed industrial policies, here, because government control was loosening, everything was being given out of the hand of government. That's why it was not a government directed industrial policies. Here the restructuring started being carried out through market forces, and as a result it paved the way, or it led to virtual disappearance of entire industries. Okay, this virtual disappearance of entire industries, because restructuring started through market forces rather than being done by government directed industrial policies, is known as the largest garage sale in history. Fine, children? Is the concept of largest garage sale in history clear? It is basically the restructuring that began in Russia after its disintegration through market forces and not by the government directed industrial policies. As a result of it, the entire industry started disappearing. Okay, this industry started disappearing, and this disappearance of the entire industries came to be known as the largest garage sale in history. As during this time, or as a result, the all important valuable industries were undervalued. Means it was just like a seal, what seal we are finding nowadays, be it on a Flipkart or Myntra or any other such sites, social sites. Okay, that 50% off, 60% off, 70% off, 50 plus 50% off, like this. So it which means the all important and valuable industries had been, their prices had been decreased, they were undervalued, and they all were sold at nominal prices, throwaway prices, what we say. And simultaneously, it must be clear to you that the citizens, all citizens, had been given watches to participate in the sales. But instead of participating in the sales with that voucher, because people needed money, people required money, so those watches people sold in the black market rather than participating with that voucher in buying the company's property and being the entrepreneur. Okay, they didn't do that, and because they needed money, they sold all these watches in black market. Fine. Now the currency, the Russian currency, the value of the Russian currency, the ruble, it declined dramatically. Okay, dramatic decline in the value of Russian currency. Fine. Inflation rate was very high. As of very high inflation rate, the common people, they lost their savings, because what savings they had for the future, they started taking it out because prices increased like anything. Their currency has devalued. The collective farm system, there has been a collectivization of agriculture. Collectivized agriculture system was being practiced there. So the collective farm system disintegrated. Okay, it came to an end, and it left the people, or leaving people, without food security. Earlier, at least they were food secured. Now, they were no more food secured because the condition was not good, and collective farm system had come to an end. Sufficient food production they didn't have. As a result, Russia decided to import food grains from outside. Okay. Next, the disastrous impact on their GDP, gross domestic production. The real GDP of Russia in 1999 was below what it was in 1989. Just imagine. In 1999, what GDP Russia had, that was less than what it had in 1989. Means 10 years down the line, it had less GDP what it had 10 years before. And their old trading structure broke down completely. It was the breaking down of their old trading structure, and the worst was that without any alternative in its place. There was no alternative. Fine, this was the worst thing, in fact. In the previous system, in the old system of social welfare, what social welfare system that had been in USSR, those old system was systematically destroyed. Okay, the withdrawal of government subsidies, the withdrawal of government subsidies pushed large sections of the people into poverty. Means people were being forced into in below poverty line because government withdrew subsidies. The middle classes, from whom we had a lot of expectation, and middle classes used to lead from the front in every changes, in fact, whatsoever had taken place so far across the globe, the middle classes were pushed to the periphery of the society, and the academic and intellectual manpower disintegrated or migrated, because academic or intellectual manpower, they saw that this is not the right choice, this is not the right place for us, that's why we need to make the right choice. Better we must move out, we must go to some other places. Okay, so they migrated, either disintegrated or migrated, and we noticed, we found the emergence of a mafia in most of these countries, the emergence of the mafias in most of these countries, and they started controlling many economic activities had been controlled by these mafias. As a result, new kind of disparities started being noticed. Okay, because of the emergence of the mafias in the countries, and they started controlling the economic activities, privatization had been there, so new kind of disparities came into the society. Okay, in the post Soviet states, especially Russia, were divided between rich and poor regions. Just imagine, Russia was divided between rich and poor regions, and unlike the earlier system, there was now great economic inequality between the people. Means inequality increased manifold. The way inequality existed earlier, it increased now. This was something not acceptable, and this was very tragic and unfortunate. Okay, the construction of democratic institutions were neglected over the demands of economic transformation. The construction of democratic institutions now was not given the same attention and priority. Democratic institutions need to be given the priorities and the attentions it had not been given. Okay, as it deserved. Okay, and everything for the government was the demands of economic transformation. Democratic institutions had been kept aside, and the attention it required had not been given. The constitutions of all these countries were drafted as if they are having no time, in a hurry. The constitutions of these countries were drafted in a hurry, and most, including Russia. Apart from a constitution being drafted in a hurry, most of these countries, including Russia, had a very strong executive president with the widest possible powers that rendered elected parliaments relatively weak. Fine. Executive had been given the upper hand, and somewhere their result we are finding nowadays also, children. Last 2-3 days back, in Russian parliament, amendment had been passed, parliament had been amended, and present Russian President Vladimir Putin reserved its post or itself of president. He is there. He will remain as president of Russia till 2036. Just imagine. It was something what had been done in way back after the disintegration, when executive president had been given the widest possible powers and parliament left relatively weak. Fine. Simultaneously, in the Central Asia, the conditions were almost same. The presidents were very powerful, and most of the presidents in the Central Asian countries, they became very authoritarian. Okay, the system was all authoritative, and like the presidents of Turkmenistan, of president of Uzbekistan, just imagine, you will be shocked that they appointed themselves to power first for 10 years and then extended it for another 10 years. Generally, in a democracy, we don't hear the term more than 6 years in any country, either 4 year or 5 year or 6 year. Okay, not more than that. But here in Central Asia, we found that the presidents of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, first they appointed themselves to power for 10 years and then again extended it for another 10 years. Opposition parties, any dissent, any opposition, they were not able to tolerate. That's why they didn't allow any dissent or any opposition. Okay, a judicial culture and independence of judiciary was yet to be established. Means it was somewhere they didn't imagine. Somewhere it was very tough for them. So judicial culture they missed. Independence of judiciary, they are yet to be established in their countries. Fine. That's why we are finding the problems in these countries. Now, remember, if anything had begun, their end will also take place. And so, because their economies had been devastated, economic ruin took place. So, revival will also take place. And most of these economies, especially Russia, Russian economy started reviving in the year 2000. Means when it really became independent, after its disintegration, rather we should say, that after disintegration, 10 years after, it started reviving, or their economy started being, their revival started taking place, and several regions were there behind their revival. They were exporting, they started exporting natural resources like oil or natural gas or minerals. So the country that used to have the natural resources like oil, natural gas and minerals, and they will export. So they are bound to earn the foreign exchange reserves, and their condition is bound to be good. So revival started taking place. Second, that major oil and gas producing countries like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, they were the major oil and gas producers, producing countries. So revival was quite natural for them, and they came back, they revived. Okay. Some other countries, they have also gained because of the oil pipelines that cross their territories, for which they get rent. Remember, between India and Iran, one gas pipeline project or treaty has been signed, deal has been finalized, and the name was Iran India Pakistan gas pipeline. Pakistan had to allow only that its territory would be utilized to lay down the pipe, nothing else. And in lieu of that, Pakistan was supposed to get a very handsome amount. But see, the unfortunate condition of Pakistan and the way militancy, the terrorism has been at top in this country, and only purpose they do have to disturb its neighboring country like India, who has been tolerating like anything and who has left no stone unturned. Okay, such countries are being disturbed. So at last, India and Iran decided that okay, we can't get it through the Pakistan. That's why through Pakistan it's not possible. So they changed their minds and they told that okay, underwater we will lay down the pipeline. So these countries also started getting a handsome amount as a rent, where they allowed the oil pipelines to cross through, to pass through. And along with it, how can we forget that even the manufacturing industry, the manufacturing sector also started. Fine, children. And simultaneously, that when shock therapy took place in Russia, almost 1500 banks, 1500 banks, and other financial institutions went bankrupt. They became bankrupt. They announced their bankruptcy. Okay? And if the banks become bankrupt, just imagine what had been the condition. One such in 1998, Russia's second largest bank became bankrupt. So it was quite natural. And as a result, the money of 10,000 corporate and private shareholders was lost, along with the money kept in the bank by customers. Corporate and private shareholders, as many as 10,000 in numbers, their money was lost apart from what consumers had put there. Okay, and revival as far as concerned, remember after the 1929 Great Economic Depression, when American economy got devastated, nearly 4,000 plus American banks, firms and companies became bankrupt. Poor banks were forced to shut down their business. Then revival started taking place from 1934, means 5 years. Down the line, 5 years. That's why revival also takes place. And it used to be in the betterment or to ensure the betterment of the common people, of the citizen in all. So in the consequences, very simple thing, that what ruin it brought to the economies, people couldn't see the utopia of mass consumption. The largest garage sale what had been seen, watches what the people had been given, they didn't participate in the sale, rather they got the money by selling it in black market. Devaluation of the Russian currency ruble, inflation rose very high, people lost their savings, system of collecting farming came to an end, people were no more food secured. Russia started importing food. GDP in 1999 was below that it was in 1989. Okay, trading structure broke down. People, large sections of the people, they found themselves into poverty, condition of poverty. Middle classes, their conditions were not good. Academic and intellectual manpower disintegrated or migrated. Mafia emerged. Privatization, as a result, brought new disparities. And that's why we found that Russia was divided between rich and poor regions. Okay, and now there had been great economic inequality between the people. And thereafter, the arrangement it made for its executive wing making more strong. So the strong executive made the parliament very weak. But ultimately, revival started taking place, and courtesy goes, and courtesy or the credit goes to their natural resources, oil, natural gas, minerals, and then at last the manufacturing industries. Hope you understood it, you got the concept. Now you can answer any type of question. In case you do want to ask anything, any question, if not today, then tomorrow you must ask. Okay, till then, take care, stay safe, stay indoor, have a good day.